Hey everybody, this video is an introduction to macroeconomics. So if you're starting to study macroeconomics, maybe you're in college and taking a first year course, or you're taking AP Macro, or maybe IB Economics, guys, this video is to just introduce you to the topic of macroeconomics, okay? First of all, macroeconomics is focused on studying the economy as a whole. I like to say it was birthed in the Great Depression. Now, of course, there was some studying of macroeconomics prior to the Great Depression, but really that Great Depression is when macroeconomics really took off, and that's because that's when people said, hey, we really need to be able to study the economy as a whole. We don't need to just study, say, the corn market or the steel market. We need to be able to study the economy as a whole. Now, when we started to study the economy as a whole, we started to deal with what is called aggregates, okay? So macroeconomics deals with these things called aggregates, which is groupings of things, okay? So we group a lot of things. To make it a little bit real, think of the term GDP, okay? Gross domestic product, probably the most important macroeconomic measurement, okay? That is an aggregate measurement. It measures aggregate output. That's right, GDP measures aggregate output. It measures the total value of goods and services produced in some economy, okay? Domestically, of course, over the course of either a quarter or a year. So again, GDP is an aggregate. It's an aggregate measurement. It's the way we look at output for an entire economy. We also have another aggregate as far as measurements go called the price level, okay? We don't, again, just look at the price of corn or the price of steel. We want to know what's happening to prices generally in the economy. Think of it as an average, okay? It really is the weighted average of all prices of all final goods and services. Again, this thing is called the price level, okay? And by the way, inflation and deflation are topics of macroeconomics. And what is inflation? A rise in the price level. When prices generally are going up, doesn't mean all prices are going up, but prices generally, on average, are going up. Deflation, price level going down. We also have focuses on the unemployment rate, which again is an aggregate, okay? We don't just look at employment in the tech sector or the agricultural sector. We generally look at employment across the economy as a whole, and our number one measurement is the unemployment rate. So again, economics deals with aggregates. Or macroeconomics deals with aggregates. Here are some other aggregates macroeconomics deals with. These are called macro aggregate actors. And the good news is there's only 5. That's right, in the entire course, there's just 5 macro aggregate actors. These actors make decisions, because remember, economics is all about decision making, and they make decisions. Who are they? They are the government and the Fed. Those are our public sector actors. They can make decisions in society's best interest. Can make decisions in society's best interest. Do they always? Well, that's up to debate, but they can make decisions in society's best interest. We also have private sector actors, and there's only 3 of them. Households, businesses, and the rest of the world. And we can pretty much count on these actors to make decisions in their own self-interest, okay? So we have self-interested actors and we have public sector actors, okay? Again, these are aggregate actors. Just to make this point clear, look at this one, businesses, right? That means that we aggregate even a single salon, a hair salon, along with Amazon. That's right, a sole proprietorship. If you just like a single person owning a business, a hair salon, that gets aggregated along with Amazon or Google or Apple, any of those companies, and we just aggregate all that together and we just call it businesses. So again, macroeconomics deals with these aggregates, okay? Aggregate measurements and aggregate actors. And there are some aggregate markets, okay? But I'm not going to go into that in this video. I'm just going to say there's markets like the product market, the exchange market, the loanable funds market, and the resource market. But I'm going to save that for a different video. But those are the markets we'll deal with. That's where these actors come together and do exchanges. Now, continuing on with what is macroeconomics, guys, this is the foundational graph. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be the most important graph in your class. I really think the most important graph in a first-year macroeconomics class is probably the ASAD model, okay? You could also argue maybe the Phillips curve model, but one of those 2 models, probably truly the ASAD model, is the most important graph. And again, I'm not going to focus on that here. I'm going to focus on the foundational graph of macroeconomics. The graph really for why macroeconomics exists, okay? It is known as the business cycle, okay? The business cycle, the fact that we have this up and down business cycle. Notice this says real GDP actual, how we grow. That's what this graph is showing, is how an economy grows across time. Oh, and by the way, hey, we're measuring an economy using this concept of real GDP, which I'll come back to the real part in a second. So across time, we're measuring the economy, and how does it grow? This up and down cycle, okay? Generally say peak, recession or contraction, trough, expansion or recovery, okay? So again, peak, recession or contraction, trough, expansion or recovery, okay? So we just kind of go through these phases of our business cycle. The problem is we don't want to grow like the black line, this real GDP actual. How we would rather grow is like real GDP potential. And that's what this is, real GDP. It's not real GDP pot, it's real GDP potential. And here's an interesting thing on this graph that you might notice, is that means the actual output can be above our potential output at times in the short run. Let me say that again. Our actual output can be above our potential output at times in the short run, okay? So again, why does economics exist? Or not why does economics exist, I apologize. Why does macroeconomics exist? Because of this up and down growth, this kind of boom bust pattern of our growth, okay? Now, let's focus on kind of one of these bust periods, heading into a recession or a contraction. What generally happens, I like to say, is the snowball kind of increases. Okay? Things get worse and worse and worse. Sometimes you get momentum building on itself. When we start going down, there's momentum that just builds on itself that makes us go down more and more and more. Generally, what I like to say is we enter into bust cycles. And by the way, what I'm about to go over is also true for the expansion or recovery. It's just every single arrow on here you would flip and put it the opposite way, okay? So this is a bust cycle. We do get into boom cycles also, but let's focus on this bust cycle. Something happens that gets consumer and business confidence to go down. When consumer and business confidence go down, what do these private sector actors acting in their own self-interest do? They begin to spend less. They get nervous, they spend less. Maybe politicians might try to get them to spend more. Hey, go to the store, spend. But they're going to act in their own self-interest. And when you get nervous, you believe your self-interest is to conserve, it is to save. So they will save more, spend less. Inventories, okay, the goods and services we've produced that are kind of like at the marketplace but haven't been bought yet, those inventory levels start to go up. Then prices start to go down. Now this is kind of interesting because oftentimes in bust cycles we might not get deflation, and that's what this is. A decrease in the price level is actually deflation. We might just get the inflation rate coming down. So if we had, like, say, a 4% inflation rate, it might come down to 3. If we had a 3% inflation rate, maybe it'll come down to 2, or a 2 comes down to 1, right? Just the inflation rate starts to come down, all right? That's called disinflation. So we're either going to get deflation or disinflation, okay? Again, prices actually coming down or the rate of increase slowing. Now, then we will also get a decrease in production, right? Those inventory levels went up. We're going to say, hey, cut my orders, okay? So the retail stores say, cut my orders, okay? When they say cut my orders, production is going to get reduced. This gets reported in the news as a decrease in GDP. And then, of course, manufacturers are going to eventually lay off some workers. We're going to get unemployment. The major type of unemployment we get in these bust cycles is known as cyclical unemployment, okay? i.e. business cycle, right? Cyclical unemployment. That gets reported as an increase in the unemployment rate. When this gets reported and this gets reported, guess what? Consumer and business confidence goes down, and it just kind of feeds on itself. We can get kind of stuck in this cycle. If you think of the Great Depression, right? We were stuck in the cycle. It was feeding on itself. And so a lot of people at the times, or especially a specific person known as John Maynard Keynes, but a lot of others started to say, hey, we need to do something about this, and we can't rely on private sector actors to act counter to this cycle. They're going to continue to act with this cycle. They're going to act what we call pro-cyclically, okay? So when we start going down, they're going to act pro-cyclically. They're going to go with the cycle and cause us to go down even more. Pro-cyclical actions are destabilizing. What we need is something to bring stability. We need a counter-cyclical action. What do we have? We've got our public sector actors. Who are public sector actors? The government and the Fed. So let me bring them over here, okay? The government, right here, they have a couple of levers. The levers we generally say in macroeconomics that they have are taxes and government spending. Government spending is both government, I can't even say it, government purchases, sorry about that, and transfer payments. Let me say that again. Government spending is both government purchases and transfer payments, okay? So I'm gonna just go ahead and put that right underneath it. So government purchases and transfer payments. Anyhow, the government, when this happens, what can they do? They can lower taxes and increase government spending. Lowering taxes gives more disposable income to consumers. Hopefully they will spend some more, and they can transfer money to the consumer, also increasing disposable income. Hopefully they'll spend some more, or just go build roads, bridges, schools, things like that, getting more spending. They're trying to reverse this arrow. They're acting counter-cyclically. And the other public sector actor, the Fed, okay? The general thing the Fed has a lot of influence over. They don't control as directly. By the way, government really controls these things directly. The Fed has a lot of influence over something, doesn't control it quite directly, but what is that thing? It is the interest rate, or interest rates in the economy is probably a better way to say it. Interest rates in the economy, if we're busting, they're gonna lower interest rates, hopefully to get borrowers to borrow more and therefore spend more, and savers to actually save less because the benefits of savings is going down, and hopefully spend more, okay? Again, focused on reversing this arrow, trying to get that arrow to head back up, and if they can reverse that arrow gets reversed, that arrow gets reversed, that arrow gets reversed, that arrow gets reversed. Their goal is to come in there and say, look, I don't want to keep on going down. I want to moderate that business cycle. I don't want to keep on going down. I want to moderate that business cycle. Now, as we end, I want to talk a little bit about the booms. The booms are fun, but we generally want to moderate those booms also. Why do we want to moderate those booms? Because the bigger the boom often leads to the bigger the bust. Why? The bigger the expansion period, people get euphoric. It's the opposite of this. They want to spend a ton, right? And so they'll even start to borrow to spend. Both consumers and businesses will take on more and more debt to spend more and more. And again, just why businesses? Businesses are getting more and more demand for their products. They're trying to keep up with that demand. They're trying to expand their businesses, so they're also borrowing. So what we'll get is increases in debt for both households and businesses. So an increase in debt, which has to get repaid at some point. And also, some of our assets become overvalued, okay? What are the assets I'm talking about? These are called asset bubbles, by the way. The stock market and the housing market, their valuations might get above what they generally are, usually, okay? We'll get these things, we'll call them asset bubbles. It's when their prices of these assets get above their, quote, true valuation. So I'm gonna put, we got our stocks and our housing market, right? Stocks and our housing market, their prices go up, they get overvalued. And guess what? If they get overvalued, they get ripe for a correction. So the bigger the boom, the more stocks might get overvalued, housing market might get overvalued, and debt gets taken on, and that just keeps on happening with those booms. And when that happens, when you get that correction, and these prices start coming down, sometimes quite quickly, and that debt has to get repaid, that's gonna make a bigger bust. Again, the bigger the boom, the bigger the bust. So we really wanna moderate, yes, the bust, but we also wanna moderate the booms, okay? I hope that makes sense to you. Macroeconomics, foundational graph. What we need to do, or what we want to do, what we desire to do, at least the consensus view of macroeconomics, is moderate our business cycle. Our business cycle happens because they get caught up in boom and bust cycles. Perhaps these entities, these public sector actors, can act counter-cyclically. Again, this is just for your first year class, okay? I know there's a lot of complexities with what I just said, and even a lot of arguments in regards to what I just said, but this is just a first year foundational introduction to macroeconomics and helping you as you engage this subject. I hope that made sense to you. I'll see you in the next video.